Welcome, everybody. Today's our week number 11 of 12. And today we're very lucky to have with us Julie Hess. Julie Hess is a coach, a writer, very well known in the professional industry. She has been invited to WBEX. It's one of the most important and most prestigious coaching conferences that we have every year. And I had a chance to listen to your recording. Julie, that was great. And I think that the book you shared with me as being a participant of one of my classes, the group supervision program. And I really thought that that would be a great book to support coaches. So that's the reason why we include it in this program. And we spend a lot of time talking about the structure. In level 1, we focus on the coaching session. And in level 2, we focus on the whole process. And I think your book is a great resource to look at the whole process of coaching. So what else would you like people to know about you? And then I'll leave you to move on to
Perfect.
To whatever you want to do.
I think you did a great job. Well, I can tell you, I'm sitting in Naples, Florida right now. I live in Chicago part of the year and in Naples, Florida part of the year. I've been a coach since 2001. I won't go into all my background. You can see that on LinkedIn or wherever we see these things. But I did my certification in 2001 with the Hudson Institute. I'm on faculty there, and then became a coach supervisor, did my certification in 2019, and then completed my group supervision certification with Damien yesterday. So that's my journey. So I spend the majority of my time working one-on-one with senior leaders. We just had a conversation about team coaching in our cohort. I let go of team coaching a couple of years ago. I really am focusing now on the one-on-one, although it was a really rich experience for me. And I have a couple of groups, supervision groups, and some one-on-one supervision clients. That's how I spend my time, and writing. So I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today because, as I said earlier, there's nothing I like better than talking about coaching with other coaches. And so I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about the book, why we wrote it, and then get right into it. Let's talk about the framework and how you might apply it. I have some tools to share with you, and I'll make sure, Damien, we have a stop at the top of the hour at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock my time.
The class will last 2 hours, and you can use as much as you want. And
okay, well, you can kick me out whenever you want. So I skinny things down because I wanted to be respectful of your time, but I'll take as many questions and stay with you as long as you like. So, and thank you for sharing your backgrounds with me. It's really helpful to know where you're landing, so that I can kind of target this to the right level. So, so the genesis of the book, it was really during the pandemic. I was, as I'm sure many of you were doing, trying to stay connected to friends and colleagues. And I was talking to my dear friend, Laura Daly, who's my co-author. And Laura and I both we do a lot of work with new coaches. So we coach coaches going through coaching classes. So you may have all had coaches. Also as a supervisor, I work with new coaches. And that particular day, I was just really recognizing a lot of the coaches were coming to me with the same problems over and over again. And my inside voice went, oh, if you'd just done this 5 steps ago, you wouldn't have that problem. And Laura had also had that experience. And we thought during our conversation, after talking about having a good laugh about some of our mistakes, some of the things that we do now so that we don't make those mistakes. And that day we said, oh God, wouldn't it have been great if we had a book that said all of this? And this is actually true. We named the book that day. It was not named Do Your Best Coaching. It was named We Made Mistakes So You Don't Have to. So as we talk about sticky situation and mistakes, please understand that the genesis of all of this is our experience making mistakes. So there should be no shame in talking about things that go sideways in coaching in this group. So we started that day, we're like, what would it look like? And we started talking to other coaches, and because we didn't want it to just be kind of reliant on our experience. And we got kind of energized about this topic of sticky situation. So I would call a sticky situation anything that gets in the way of the coaching work. So HR challenging you on confidentiality, or not being able to get a sponsor engaged in the process, or your client, you feel like you're working harder than your client, all of those things, sticky situations. But I would say about a year into writing it, everything changed for me and for the book. And I don't know, Damien, if you know this, but it was during Damien's conference. Damien runs the America's Coaching Supervision group, and he has an annual conference. And in 2020, it was virtual for the first time, and I was there, and Pam McLean spoke. And I'm actually going to start sharing screen. Hang on just a minute. Give me 1 minute, please. See what I can do here for you. All right, trying to get give me 1 minute. There we go. I don't want this slide, I want this slide. This is what she said in that conference. She said, it's very easy for experienced coaches to fall into habit. Meaningful conversations about what we do as coaches and why gives us the opportunity to be intentional about our practices and re-energize our work. And it was a real aha for me. It was an aha moment, because up until then, we've been thinking about, well, what do coaches need to do? And how do they stay out of trouble? And when I heard Pam's, and a lot of it was focused on new coaches. And that moment I realized, yeah, I've been a coach for almost 20 years. I definitely fall into habit. And that is why I get into sticky situations now, because I get comfortable. I forget to do something. That question that was asked earlier, how do you avoid the status quo? That's something experienced coaches bump up against. And so we started thinking about this, and that was the genesis of the intentional engagement framework that kind of grounds the book, which is, if I am being intentional about how I start an engagement, what I do during it, and how I end it, I am going to create the space to do my best coaching work. And I'm not going to be distracted by these sticky situations that come up time and time again when I'm not doing that. So that is the genesis of that. So Damien, thank you for having that conference and having Pam there. It was a real contribution to us. So today, we're going to review the intentional engagement framework, talk about it perhaps in a way you haven't thought about it as you read it yourself. I'm going to try and really draw the link between intentionality and preventing sticky situations, and then we'll dive into Q&A and share ideas together. So I cannot see the chat right now. I'm in a rental home. I don't have my office and my monitor. So Damien, if you can watch the chat for me, if anything comes up,
I will do that.
I would really appreciate it. That'd be great.
So you want to encourage people to do it? You want to encourage people to write notes or questions or comments? Oh,
sure. Yeah. If you guys have questions along the way, you certainly can. Let's not be formal. You certainly can go ahead and raise your hand. You can speak. I'm not a very formal presenter. You can interrupt me. I really don't care. If you put something in the chat, Damien can get my attention. It's all good. Okay. So I like starting with the concept of sticky situations to ground intentional engagement. And for some of the newer coaches, these might feel a little theoretical to you. So just trust me when I say, every single one of the 50 coaches that we interviewed bumped up against some of these, so you will too. We're going to try and help you avoid some of them. But just to start, and actually, you know what? I wanted to see if I can see my chat. Hang on. Just open the chat. I'm going to open the chat for this part of it, Damien. Take a look at these sticky situations and see which of them look familiar to you. And if you wouldn't mind throwing into chat, like the numbers of the ones that you're familiar with. And like I said, I've done all of these, so please don't be shy. I mean, normally when I do this conversation with coaches, it's like 1, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10. So take a moment, see where you think that you've experienced these. And if you don't understand one, you can certainly ask me. Seven. Yep. Coaching getting solid 8 and 10. Yep. Lots of working harder than the client. I see that a lot. And this is interesting. Only one person talking about closing. That is something a lot. Oh, there's another one. A lot of coaches that I've spoken with struggle with closing because we don't want to end the relationship or for whatever reason. So but only 2 of you are bringing that one up. So All right, so you guys are seeing some themes here. A lot of coaching stalled, working harder than the client. Oh, a rescue mission. Yep. I've had those before. So, okay. So let's hold those. And Dan, I see, and Dan and John thinking about struggling with the leadership and coaching plans, and that's going to be important later on. All right. So let's hold that. And as kind of a frame as we talk about intentional engagement. So, oh, come on. My slide got stuck for a minute. There we go. All right. So this is not the intentional engagement framework, but it is a metaphor I love to help make sense of the intentional engagement framework. So this is the frame of a house. And if you were to walk by this house as it was being built, it would look, framing looks like this. Framing holds the space for the rooms of a house. But if you went by this house 2 weeks later, it might all be closed up and you wouldn't see the framing anymore. But the framing would still be there. And it's critical, right? Because without that framing, what happens? It's like, whoosh, the rooms would collapse on themselves. I think that just like the frame of a house, intentional engagement holds the space for the coaching conversations and for that relationship. And like the frame of a house, it should be invisible to your client. This is not a very client forward process. These are the things that we do as a coach to make sure that we maintain a healthy engagement so that we can do our best work. And I appreciate, Damien, the distinction you made. You said in your first class, you talk about the coaching conversation. In the second class, you talk about the engagement process. I think it's great because most courses don't focus on that. They focus on the coaching conversation. And we don't focus on the coaching conversation because most coach certification programs do a really good job of that. So let's look at the framework. You've seen it because you have the book, but I'm going to walk you through it. And I don't know, sometimes when I hear a framework I've read about, talked about, it's helpful. So as you've seen in the past, it's 4 phases: creating the container, establishing the through line, making progress, and ending with meaning. And those 7 circles inside are the components within a coaching engagement. But we know there's a lot that goes into each of them. So I'm going to do a walk around the circle. And again, if any questions come up, you can just speak them out, or Damien, you can flag me and tell me that there's questions coming up. Okay. So intentional engagement really starts with that first call, whether it's from the corporation, the HR, the client, whoever it is who's calling you to make that initial inquiry. That is your first opportunity to start to tell people who you are as a coach. What's your coach philosophy? What does a coaching process look like? Start to establish boundaries, confidentiality, all of those things that are really important for your client to know. I'm sure many of you have had situations where you've gone to talk to a potential client and they don't know what coaching is. Is that right? Is that fair? Anybody? Right? And just that mere act of explaining what a coaching engagement looks like, it can be very helpful in setting up a healthy engagement. Same thing with boundaries and confidentiality. I'm a big believer in a healthy client intake and kickoff process. What does that look like? I send my client an intake form in advance. Some of it's demographics, but there's a lot of questions there. Things like, why coaching? Why coaching now? Have you had coaching before? What's worked well for you? How do you learn? I have a whole set of questions, and we actually now have a workbook out that has an intake form in it that you can take a look at. But the act of getting your client to look at an intake form puts them into a coaching mindset before your first meeting. And that actually is really helpful in preventing a sticky situation, which is not starting strong and regretting it. We could talk about that in a little bit. But it's essentially your client showing up and having something they need to talk about urgently. And then 3 sessions later, you're like, wait, I don't know anything about my client. We just dove into the coaching. So doing that thoughtful intake process really helps build that relationship, but put that client into that coaching mindset. So we go from there to establishing the through line. Now, you know that establishing the container doesn't just end right after the intake meeting. We're going to keep doing that all the way along. But when we move into establishing the through line, that's really where we're helping that client build their self-awareness. Who am I today? Right? What do I know about myself as a person, as a leader? I may do self-assessment. I may do 360 assessment. There's many, many assessments you can use. At the same time, I am an aspirational coach. I think it is really important to be working with my client to help them think about their values and their vision for who they want to be. There's been a lot of research that coaches who work with their client on developing a vision have a better relationship with their client and are more successful. And by more successful, I mean their clients achieve their goals more successfully. So while I am doing assessment, I almost always do a 360 assessment. I will have my client working on their vision and their values, and those two things together. Where am I today? Where do I want to go in the future? Is what forms the foundation for the coaching plan and the coaching goals. How those things are, how are we going to help you get from here to there? That coaching plan is critical for if you have a sponsor. Some engagements may not have a sponsor. Sitting down with that sponsor to engage them in the process at that point. Now, I have already talked to my sponsor before that, right? I've either interviewed them for a 360 or had a context setting meeting, but preparing my clients so that they can talk to their sponsor about what they've learned through assessment and where they're thinking about their vision going and how that translates into their coaching plan helps get their sponsor engaged in their development, gives the sponsor a chance to provide feedback. Are we on the right page? And gets them engaged in a way, how can that sponsor support your client's development? You're not there all the time. So how do you really actively get them engaged? So I'm going to pause for a minute. Is this making sense? I can't see all of you because I don't have my monitor. So you can say something, or questions are great too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, it's making sense.
All right.
So clear. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So we move from establishing the through line to making progress. Making progress, you'll see the coaching sessions, but it's not about the coaching conversation. It is about, how do I make sure that I'm prepared for that coaching session, that I'm being thoughtful, that I am not flying into it from another meeting, how I can maintain my presence during the coaching session. So, some of it is about preparing your client. I will tell you that is the most controversial thing that we talked about with other coaches during research is, do you prepare your clients for coaching sessions or not? 50% of the coaches are like, absolutely not. It is a client, that is the client's responsibility. The other 50% are like, I can't imagine coaching without sending my client an email or something before the session. So, and I don't have a point of view on what is the right way to do it. But I can talk to you about different ways to do it if that's interesting to you guys when we do Q&A. And then after the coaching session, how are you reflecting on the session? How are you capturing your insights so that you can pull them through in a meaningful way? So you'll see midpoint alignment check. Now, hopefully and ideally, you're aligning with your client all the way through this process. You're doing little check-ins. Is this working? But I do have a formal check-in with my client halfway through the engagement. So I'll let them know that in the next meeting, I'd love to just have a quick conversation about what's working, what's not. I do tell them I'm going to send them some questions in advance for them to look at. And I try and make it as easy as possible for them. So I say, I hope everything's going well, but if there's something I can do differently, please let me know. Because if you tell me now, I can do something about it. If we don't have that conversation, we're not going to have the opportunity to make a shift together. And so we have that conversation, and it almost always goes really well, even if there's some constructive feedback. Sometimes people want more learning, articles, or they do want a prep email, or they're noticing something about timing and scheduling. Everything is addressable, and everything is going to help. That actually builds your relationship. It makes that relationship stronger, and makes the engagement more effective. It's also a time to take time to align with the sponsor. So particularly in engagements that are longer than 6 months, you want to bring your sponsor in for a midpoint alignment check. And again, I'm going to have my client leading this meeting. I'm going to prepare them in advance for it, but we're going to bring them in and say, hey, we've been at this for X number of months. Here's what we've been working on. Here are the experiments. Here's what we've noticed. What do you notice, Mr. Sponsor or Mrs. Sponsor? And they give great feedback. And again, it's another opportunity to engage their ongoing support and give them a chance to provide feedback and hear feedback from other people as well. So, and then we come to ending with meaning. And I am passionate about ending with meaning because I think the closing of an engagement should be as impactful as the work that's preceded it. And I will tell you that before we wrote this book, I was not great at this. I have I have been known to forget that the closing of an engagement was like right around the corner. And then I'm like, oh my God. So I am very careful now about tracking my clients, knowing where they are. And, about 4 weeks before a closing, I'll let the client know we're coming towards the end of our engagement. Let's think about how we're going to end it. I'll help them harvest their learnings. I'll send them questions to think about and reflect on. Sometimes I do what I call a progress check, a progress assessment. So I'll go back to the people I did a 360 with and just ask them. I'll say, here are the goals of just 15 minutes, not a whole long discussion, but here's 3 things the client was working on. Where do you see progress and where there's still opportunities for improvement? So that can factor into the closing. We do have a closing meeting with the sponsor so that the sponsor can see the progress that's been made, provide feedback. I will help my client create an ongoing development plan because development does not end with coaching, and they get the sponsor engaged in that ongoing development plan. And all of this in the spirit of transitioning out of coaching really smoothly and effectively, and really helping your client feel positioned to, fly after coaching. The only thing that I might add also is sometimes I do what I call a 10,000-mile tune-up. So at the end of an engagement, we'll put something on the calendar for like 2 or 3 months out just to check in. How you doing? What's going on? And a lot of clients really appreciate that. Because, and also the ending of a coaching engagement isn't the end of a coaching relationship. So you're going to still, be connected to this person, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's by email, but that can be a nice thing to do. So that is the intentional engagement framework. Questions, thoughts, comments? I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute so I can see you guys. Thoughts, questions, comments?
Hey, Julie.
Hey.
One thing that this book has been super helpful, as you say, moving from the here's how to have a session to here's how to have an engagement. It's just a lot of really useful prompts and ideas on how to incorporate, the vision exercise or the goals, the coaching plan template, and stuff like that. What I'm finding now in the beginning is that there's a lot of labor and energy that goes into like creating these and keeping them straight and trying to make sure that I don't templatize things so much that they're actually not as valuable. How do you strike that balance as you're moving through this really, really nice process that you have? And I imagine you're scaling at a very different level than I'm scaling right now.
I don't know that that's true or not true, but I will tell you this. I think I'm so glad you asked this question because Laura and I say this all the time. This is a perspective. It is not a prescription. I do not do the same thing with every client every time. All clients are different. Some of them are very process driven. Some of them can't stand process. So I use aspects of all of it, but how I do it depends on who's in front of me. Some clients want homework. They want to go do their coaching plan by themselves and then talk to me. Sometimes we do it together in the session. Sometimes clients don't want a coaching plan, and I kind of have one in my head for them based on what we're talking about, and we'll articulate the goals. So I appreciate what you're saying in the sense that that you don't want to over standardize it. I agree. And I mentioned earlier that we now have a workbook out, and I have some examples of things in the workbook that I can show you. but we deliberately didn't offer this as like a PDF set of tools or an ebook, because we want you to take what we have and make it your own, right? And so often we'll offer a template of things. So the intake form is a great example of that. We say, here's a sample intake form, and here's 20 other questions that you could put into the intake form, because we do it differently every time. So in terms of staying organized, when you figure that out, could you let me know about it? Because I'm like, I have like 5 different coaching plans and 6 different, and I always say over a holiday, when the holiday break comes, oh, I'm going to use this time to get organized. And it never happens. So you'll let me know. Actually, Laura and I left. We're like, writing the workbook was our way of organizing all of our stuff. So
that's great. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions before we go back? Dee Dee, I see you have a question.
I'm wondering if you could comment on how that structure might or might not change if somebody were working with an individual, rather than a sponsor, and perhaps for a shorter term engagement. Perhaps it's 4 sessions or 8 sessions or some number like that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, you said an individual who doesn't have a sponsor, right?
Right.
Yeah, great. So mostly, no sponsor meetings. And I still follow the same arc of a coaching engagement, even when it's shorter. It's just faster, and you might have them do some work in between sessions. So I still want to have a conversation with my client about who do they want to be. And I still want them to really build insight on who they are today. But we may not build a coaching plan that has so many things. It's where can we really get traction? It's interesting. I don't really do shorter coaching engagements anymore. It's been a while. But I think what you want to do based on who the client is, and I'm thinking out loud here, is really give them the foundation for growth. And one thing that you can really support them on developing and understand, if they can understand the process of development, they can start to do it themselves. Damien, do you have a comment on that? I'm curious with your experience. Nope.
No, the only thing that I want to say from what you were saying before about preparation is that I don't ask right now in my coaching practice, I don't ask my clients to be prepared for the sessions. And when the clients are prepared for the sessions, I do believe that they take very advantage of the class. So that's the reason why I suggested the participants in the program to spend time on that, and particularly because they also need to demonstrate PCC level coaching and to demonstrate that you want your clients to be ready. And by the way, congratulations. I think that most people already passed that. So,
oh my God, congratulations. That's amazing.
I think maybe there is 1 or 2 people that still need to finish, but mostly everybody. So you know who you are. Congratulations. I know it's hard work. And in the future, you may want to get, this is my perspective on that. This depends on the client. Some clients, you want them to be prepared. Why? Because they may be very scattered, not prepared. So by making them to prepare for the session, that can take more advantage. And there are some clients who are great in the moment. So you will need to have flexibility. At the end of the day, many times, Julie, with all of these things, if there is not a recipe,
exactly.
you need to be wise. You need to apply what you know. And I think you have good resources. Julie's is a great book. You have my book. You have ICF documents. And then you need to use self as instrument. Julie shared that she was trained at the Hudson Institute with Pam. And Pam, she has a book about it, self as instrument, what I do believe is a great resource. And I think that goes with your book very well, in terms of using ourselves as instruments to make decisions about how to deal with these challenging situations.
Actually, in chapter 9 of the book, the self as coach, the book is called self as coach, self as leader, self as leader, self as coach. I can't remember which way, but the framework is in chapter 9 of the book because we love it. So chapter 9 of the book is about development, your own development as a coach, and that framework is in there. So, and Damien, I actually am biased in the same way. I didn't prepare my clients before I started writing this book, and then I started interviewing people, and I thought, I'm going to just try this. So I started sending emails to my clients with some questions, and they loved it. And I don't care if they send it back to me. I don't care. I just want them to think about it. And so it is now part of my practice. So that's just me. So let's go back because I want to just make this connection to sticky situations for you, and show you some tools, and then we can dive into questions and answers. So, okay, yep, I'm sharing. I'm going to go into screen. Hang on. Okay. So we've gone through this model, and as you have all probably realized, those 7 circles are really deceptive, right? They're so little and so clean, but there's so much that goes into them. So I thought it'd be helpful to show you kind of, this is just what one of those circles looks like. So in the workbook, we have these, now we've made these process diagrams that talk about all the things that happen in a closing. Because it's hard to keep track of everything that needs to happen. And again, perspective, not prescription. You don't have to do all of this, but it's kind of nice to have it set out in front of you. So the things on the top line in blue are the things that you do yourself with the client, with the sponsor. The things on the orange that's the kind of coach prompt. What am I doing as a coach? So each of those, hang on, each of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 components, has a lot that goes on in it. So let's go back to sticky situations for a moment. Here's the 10 that we talked about. And now I've put them against the framework, the intentional engagement framework, so you can see how they play out. And we talked about not starting strong and regretting it, that experience of a client showing up and having something they need to talk about right away. And then a couple sessions later, you're like, oh, I didn't do intake. I don't know some things I need to know. And it's hard to go back at that point. If you do have an intake form, you've alerted your client that there's an intake process. And so it's a little easier to either say, let's take the last 15. I'm always going to talk to a client about something that's urgent, that's happening for them, even if it's the first session. But I also will say, and I want to reserve some time at the end to make sure we're starting to create our foundation for our coaching, or we'll do it in the next session. It just makes it easier. So if you think about some of these, and I'm thinking about the ones that you all mentioned, somebody mentioned struggling with leadership, vision, goal setting, or coaching plans, and such an important aspect of a coaching engagement. I actually always talk to my client about what they should expect, even during the chemistry call. This is what the process looks like. This is what we're doing. So there's no surprises, and people aren't feeling surprised that they're going to get assessed. And that's a possible way that they don't want to do a vision. I'm going to talk to them not only about what it is, but why it is. And in fact, I think I have a coaching process. Hang on, I'm just going to go really quickly to course. There it is. So this is a document I use that I'm happy to send to all of you. I use this document with my clients early on to walk them through. This is a client-facing document, not the intentional engagement framework is not a client-facing framework. This is something I use with my clients to say, hey, here's what we're doing, but also the outcomes. Here's why. And I can talk to them about why it's important to have a vision for the future. And I can talk to them about why it's really important to get their sponsor engaged in the coaching if they have a sponsor, and how it can support their development. So having something like this laid out, whether it's this one or one you make yourself, can support that discussion about what to expect, and there are no surprises. Another reason why people might get caught with, have trouble with vision or goal setting is they can't put it on paper. And I can interview people or take them through exercises. In fact, in the workbook, I think we have like 6 different exercises to help a client create their leadership vision. There's like using metaphor, there's 2 guided ones, there's a form that like a writing form that they can fill out, because clients are all different. Some of them want to go away and write and think about it. Some want to talk about it with you. Some are more visual. So there's lots of ways to tap into how to do that. One that always comes up is working harder than the client, or the coaching stalled, feeling like it's stalling. And I think that really avoiding those two is going to be in the roots of the container that you create, or in the through line that you create. So if coaching is stalling or meandering, it's probably because you didn't do a coaching plan, or it's the wrong set of coaching goals, which is okay. It's just a great opportunity to say, hey, it feels like things are stalling, or we're not getting traction. Let's revisit this. Maybe we're not thinking about the right stuff. But if you have a coaching plan and a set of coaching goals, it's kind of the umbrella that guides the work, and it won't float around. And I want to be really clear about something. I'm an engineer by training, but I am not a process person. I do not have the coaching plan out for every single coaching session. We rarely look at it together, but we often discuss goals, or we'll discuss the vision. It's just a way to keep what's most important in mind and to pull that thread through. So, knowing you're not at your best at coaching sessions is near and dear to my heart. So I can't remember what page this is on. I think it's like on page 206 of the book. There's a story about a coach who was just really busy all the time and flying to coaching sessions all the time and not doing their best work, even though their clients didn't know the difference. And that was me. I was really busy. I was like sliding into coaching sessions, and I felt really crummy about it. My clients were really happy. I felt really crummy about it, and I knew I could be doing better work. And the reason I laugh and say it's on page 206 is because after the book was published, one of Laura's and my good friends and colleagues called Laura or texted her and said, hey, is that me on page 206? And Laura texted me, is that Seth? And I said, no, I know it's not Seth. I know that because it's me. But it's such a good story because we all run into these same things, over and over again. So how do you make sure you're at your best in your coaching session? Really, what's the right number of clients for you, right? What is your practice to presence yourself before a coaching engagement? How do you help your clients presence? Damien reminded me of something, that whole prep thing. Some clients don't do it. I'm sure many of you have had a client who wants to cancel a session because they haven't had a chance to think about it, or they show up and they're like, I'm so sorry, I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to think about things. I love that. I'm like, great. I'm so glad you're here. Why don't you take just a few minutes, take 3 minutes, turn your camera off, or if I'm there, I'll say, I'm just going to go out for a minute. Take a moment, ground yourself, and think about what the past couple of weeks have been like, or what's on your mind. And then we'll get going. And giving them that time makes the whole session much more impactful than if we just like fly into whatever's top of mind for them. So there's a lot of, tips and tricks that I've developed over the years. A lot of them are in the book. I'm sure, Damien, you have as well. And I'm sure all of you have. And I encourage you, one of the most important things about the book, and was really important for Laura and I, is learning and community. I think coaching is a very lonely profession. We are there for our clients. They are not there for us. Even they might love us, but they're not there for us. We're there for them. And so being in a supervision group with other coaches, having a book club with other coaches, just gathering with other coaches, talking about ideas and ways you can do things, I think is really essential. Development, doing learning with other people. I'm trying to remember, Katie did the leadership circle. Katie, I'm sure you met a lot of coaches and you had a lot of discussions about ways to do things, right? So any type of development that you're doing with other coaches, the more you can share ideas and how to do things, the better. And I always come from a place of abundance. I wrote a book about how I coach, right? I'm not trying to hide or share, there's no secrets here, because what I do is what I do. You can't do what I do. I'm who I am. You do what you do. Great. So, keeping your way of doing things, kind of that scarcity mentality, can actually, I think, backfire. The more we can support each other as coaches, I think the better. So that I will get off my soapbox now. So questions, thoughts, comments, is this making sense to you guys? Let me stop sharing for a minute. Hang on. Let's see. What do you think?
You make it sound easy. It's fantastic. The framework that you provided, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, you know, it only took me 20 years to get it this easy. It wasn't this easy in year 1, 2, or 3, or even year 5. So, what ideas or questions are sparking for you?
What's coming up for me is there's so much, right? I mean, the learning curve for me, I'm probably at the steepest part. And I think taking the time to go back, not to read your book like it's some dogma or the Bible, but just spark the ideas and spark different ways of approaching problems. I think this idea that all clients are different, it seems very natural to say it out loud, but how you adapt your practice and your habits to do that, I think is something that's going to take some effort for it to become muscle memory for me. So I think your book does a nice job of sprinkling different ideas and different approaches that could be really helpful.
Yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. It takes a long time to get this fluidity. I mean, honestly, I got my certification in 2000. And our hope, Laura and my hope, was that this would help. I don't want it to take you 20 years. I'm trying to shortcut the process for you. But there is a certain amount of, you know, you can read about it, but you sort of have to do it and give yourself some grace. It's not always going to go smoothly. I mean, it doesn't always go smoothly for me. Sometimes, you know, I end up in a sticky situation. But the more you're intentional, the more you think about it, you won't get stuck there for a long time. You'll know how to get yourself out, or it won't go so deep. So David's raising his hand. David Charles, what do you got?
Yeah, so I have a question. Very, very tactical, practical. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're like, you know, I didn't do enough to give the client value in that hour, and you gave the client like another hour?
I'm sure I have.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you that is your idea about what value is to the client, because sometimes we don't know what resonates with the client. In fact, I always ask my clients at the end of every session, tell me what resonated with you, because it's not always what resonated with me. And so it's really helpful to know. And then I actually weave that into their email that I send them. So I'll say, you know, what are a couple of things that really landed on you, that made a difference to you? And then I write them down. And then when I send them an email, I say, in our last session, here are some things that really landed on you. And then I ask them some questions and pull it. So David, I'm sorry, you probably had another question. I didn't mean to cut you off. I got excited.
Oh no, you're fine. And so I guess the follow-up then is that, do you have any kind of sense for that distinction? Because I think part of, maybe I should speak for myself here. There are, for some of the sessions have to be, there's some administrative elements. So for example, what I'm dealing with right now is I'm trying to talk to my client about doing a 360, but we're finding a lot of value in the process of just thinking about, what is this a value? Is it not? What would you want to learn? But I'm feeling like, you know, I wonder if I should be giving her another like session or two, because we're not working on the key thing that she asked to talk about when we first started the engagement. Does that make sense?
It does. I think you have to go slow to go fast. And so those conversations that you're having about what's valuable and what's not valuable are helping her build self-awareness. Why is it valuable? Why is it not valuable? You're the only one who can know if you're hit, you know, if you really think that, look, I've had sessions where I think I've really blown it. So, you know, I mean, but I don't think it's a good practice to regularly give away your time. It's just a boundary that you should set. It doesn't mean I don't go over 10 minutes or whatever, or, you know, I'm actually a violator of what I just said. I'm overly generous with my time because I love my clients, but I don't think it's a great practice. So I don't recommend it for others. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. I guess what I would like to say is I'd like you to have confidence in the fact in the work that you're doing. Give yourself some grace. And if you have a moment where you think you've really blown it, well, then you can address that. But most of the time you haven't. And I'm sure many of you have had this experience. I know Damien has had this experience where a client will come back to you 5 or 10 years later and go, oh, that conversation that we had, that question you asked me, that changed everything. And I'm like, I don't remember asking that question.
Now, Julie, what I want to do also is to reinforce the importance of supervision.
Yes.
Julie's a supervisor. We offer supervision here to the participants as an optional activity. So
you should do it.
some of the participants from the supervision program can practice and get their hours and recordings with some of the, but it has not been mandatory. But I do believe strongly that supervision is a place to continue having these conversations. And do you know what? Doesn't matter how much experience you have. Like Julie here, she's being very generous and authentic. And I can relate. I have been doing this forever. And I also have these questions. You know, it's like we're humans. We are not all the time at our 100%. And I do believe that we need that space to reflect and co-partner with somebody to look at this. I promise things are going to come up. Sometimes we may not have the answers, or we may not know what we don't know. So I want to encourage everybody to continue working with the supervisor after the program.
I have to tell you, I cannot imagine coaching without supervision. Now that I've been doing supervision for 5 or 6 years now, maybe I think I do one-on-one supervision, and I do my own supervision, not the supervision I give to others, my own development work. I'm in a supervision group. I've had a one-on-one supervisor. I cannot imagine doing coaching without it. And what's interesting about what you just said, Damon, is the ICF just had they have a community of learning. And the last session, they did a PowerPoint on what are issues people bring to supervision, because it's hard, particularly in group supervision, when a group is just getting to know each other, to feel confident enough to say, this is where I screwed up, or this is something I'm having trouble with. And so they shared a whole bunch of issues that you might bring to supervision. I can send it to you, Damien. You can share it with people. I thought it was super. I sent it to my supervision group that I run. And I also shared with them, here's 3 examples of cases I've brought to supervision, so they could feel that way. So I'll send it to you.
Julie, usually at this time of the session, we take a 5-minute break at the top of the hour. Would that be okay if we do that and continue in 5 minutes?
It's fine. And I don't want to monopolize your time either. So maybe
if you can stay, you stay as much as you can stay. Okay, when you have to go, let us know.
Let's take a break.
But let's take
and then Katie and Kevin have questions. I won't lose that.
Let's do that.
I'm writing it down.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. This is great, Julie. I really appreciate you. So I think Kevin and somebody have their hands up.
Kevin and Katie both had questions.
Yes, Julie, I wanted to share with you, if I could, how your book intersected with my work.
Great.
So, and how you managed, though we hadn't ever met, to create like psychological safety for me to feel like I could experiment and take risks in an engagement that had been going on for a long time. So I'd been working with this co-founding couple for about 2 years, and I didn't have an updated agreement. I got to the part in your book where you talked about the importance of creating the container, and I'm like, oh no. I had an opportunity to do this and I didn't. And so I tried to recreate it, but I was worried that this was going to kind of kick them to a new place and cause them to realize they're ready to move on. And that's exactly what happened. So then I read Ending with Meaning. And I said, okay, like this can still end really well. And I spent time thinking about what I needed and what I made sure to ask them how they wanted to end. One of the things that came out of that was that I sent them a reflection letter at the end, because that felt important to me. And it was great. And I just, in fact, heard back from one of those founders wanting to reconnect recently. So I wanted to share that because that's just one specific way in which this book has had an impact on my practice already. And I really appreciate the way that you lay it out there without the like fundamentalism that sometimes exists about what you should and should not do in coaching, that you're a practitioner figuring it out too. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I wish Laura was here to hear that, because she would love hearing that. I will share it with her, but that is one of the greatest joys about being with groups of people who have read the book, is hearing about, that it was helpful and that it made a difference. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So Katie, did Katie go away? There you are.
Yeah.
Where'd she go? My whole screen.
I know that it shuffles around. So, and I also, by the way, before I go into my question, I was reading sections just in time to be
That's
halfway through
great.
my first, long-term engagement, and said, how's it going? We're about halfway through, and that perspective has been so helpful. And I ended last week with a client where I got to, comment on that a couple sessions before, and then I brought questions, I think they were from the book, on to reflect on. And then, afterwards I sent a note card. Like, I wouldn't have thought to do those things. And even honored that I was feeling a little sad and it was bittersweet. Like I even said to her, it can be bittersweet when you part, so yeah, that was so helpful. Anyway, I had a couple of things. When I think about the sticky, what gets in the way of doing, what is it? How did you put it? My best coaching? Anything that gets in the way of the coaching work. It's funny because now I guess as I'm getting more comfortable being a coach and showing up on sessions, that feels not so difficult. I look forward to them. What gets in the way of the coaching work for me now is operations. Like I spent time today creating an invoice and putting an email together with, here's a payment link, and what does your company need, and did you want to do that? It's, oh my God, it's so stress inducing, just this silly things. What how do you make that go away?
I am not helpful in this regard. I hate all of that stuff. I started coaching because I like to coach, not because I like to send invoices. I am the worst. So, I mean, here's what I will tell you. I have operationalized as much as I can. I use QuickBooks. I have captured all my forms. I've captured kind of anything that I can routinize, I have, but I am routinely behind on my invoices and things because I don't like to do it. So that is not the book I wrote.
Yeah, right. I know. For me, it's like getting the coaching started with all of that can just kind of stretch out because it's, yeah. So, but one more thing, if I can, the vision, I have often done a long, like a 90-minute vision call, not charging, although I'm starting to charge for that.
You should.
And you just cover everything and get the whole story and all the background. So then I guess I'm debating now, having done that with a client who's now hiring me through her company. I'm debating, it doesn't seem to make sense necessarily to do an intake form. It's more a kickoff session of, okay, where do you want to go from here?
So Katie, that's a great question. And that's something I've come up against. So you're talking about a chemistry call. Is that right? Initially?
More than that, it was actually like, it's almost a combination of a chemistry call with coaching,
well, that's okay. I mean, I coach in my chemistry calls because I give them a flavor of what it's like to work with me. I still do an intake form. So I have made that mistake before. I'm not saying you made this mistake. My experience is this. I feel like, oh my God, I had such a connection with that person. I feel like we already have a relationship. I'm not going to send them an intake form. I don't need to do that. And then I always regret it. I always regret it. And I always, I regret not having the form, the conversation about this is what coaching is and this is how we're entering into it. I would call the vision stuff different than what you're describing. So it is really getting them to ground and think about who they are in the future. And if I have time, I'll pull up the workbook on my computer and show you. There's so many different ways you can access that. And it's very powerful. And I actually like doing it separate because it kind of encapsulates that work. I do values work first because values inform vision too. So
I love that.
I don't, again, just because I do it that way doesn't mean you need
Yeah.
to do it that way. But I will say I have made that felt like a mistake to me. I ran into trouble that way. So I don't do it that way anymore.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? I have something for you to share. But who's got other questions? Anybody? Okay, wait. I'm going to send, actually, I can put it in this chat too, but so let me just send this here. Okay, so I just put in the chat something, it's uploading, I can see it. It's an assessment. You don't have to do it right now. I'm going to share my screen again and show it to you. I think it is super helpful it's not a one and done. Like I do this sometimes. Am I sharing? There it goes. Okay. So this is an assessment that we use. Can you see this? The assessment on screen? Okay. So this is an assessment that helps you think about how are you intentionally engaging, and it changes over the course of your practice. Not only because you've learned how to do things, but sometimes you forget that you've done things. Like, Damon, has that ever happened to you? You used to do something as part of a routine practice and then you stop doing it. And then you're like, why don't I do that anymore? I don't know. So it's helpful to think about what am I doing? And it gives you an idea of where you're doing well. Like, am I really great at creating the container, but I could use more work in making progress? The second page looks like this. And we haven't really discussed chapters 8 and 9 are on coaching presence and ongoing development. And those are really critically important for coaches. So really being intentional and thoughtful about your presence during sessions and how you can develop it is critically important. And then development, your own development. If you have your own practice, you're responsible for your development. Some corporation isn't there's no L&D department. I'm my L&D department. So how do I think about where do I want to focus my resources, time, money? There's plenty of ways you can develop yourself without spending money. And in fact, Damien, look what I got today. Can you see this? This is the Michelle Lucas book on reflective practices. So you can read, you can be in a book club, but being intentional and thoughtful about your own development, I think is really important. So I popped that self-assessment in there for you. And I also thought perhaps I could share with you just an idea, some of the things that you might see in the workbook, just to give you a flavor for it, if that's helpful. Would you like to see some of that stuff? Let me just get in here for you.
I think we clearly need to buy the workbook.
I'm not trying to sell the workbook. I really am not, but I'm actually so proud of it. Because, and the reason we did it is because a lot of people said, well, can we have more of like the templates and everything that you're talking about? So let me just do this. Come on, hang on. There we go. Okay. So just to give you an idea, that's the self-assessment. It's in the workbook in the back. You'll see things like there's a complete process checklist. So the workbook follows the book and it's the same exact chapter 1, chapter 2, they follow each other, but there's a process checklist for every single chapter. So here's a checklist for preparing for calls. There's a checklist for everything. And it's woven through the book, but it's also in the back. So the whole checklist beginning to end is in the back. Here's an example of something. Here's all the questions that somebody might ask you during a chemistry call, so that I actually was talking about this with one of my supervision clients yesterday. He was thinking about how can I be more intentional about preparing for things in advance, and one of the things was chemistry calls. So being really thoughtful about preparing for things like that. This is the coaching process document. I'm going to put that into the chat for you too, so you can all download it and just have it. But that's in there. Here's an example of all the assessments that you might consider, the categories, the types, how you might use them. We talk about assessment, not just at the beginning of the engagement, but where else you might assess and why you might use other assessments. Here's a sample coaching plan. And, you know, just things you might consider. There's all sorts of emails that you can use. And again, don't use the exact thing you can use the exact thing we gave you, make it your own. You're all unique coaches. You have different clients. There's no right way to do this. It's just, these are just opportunities for you to think about what you're doing. This, though, I wanted you to see. Year in review questions, because we're at the end of the year. So we have about 4 pages in the book about a look back and a look forward, right? What did I see in my practice last year? And what do I want to do moving forward? And there's an opportunity to create your own vision and think about your own development for that as well. That's the end. We're not there yet. But just some examples. There's one more thing. So we have all of these process charts in there as well for each aspect of the practice. Enough of that. Just a flavor of a little bit more. My camera's off. Darn it. I put lipstick on and everything. My camera should be on. So just to give you a flavor, we're really trying to make things as easy as possible. You should be focusing on your client and the work you're doing with your client, not on drafting the perfect email or writing the perfect template. So there you go. Let me, before I forget, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but before I forget, I want to put that coaching process document in here for you so that you can have it. Give me 1 second. I'm not sharing the screen anymore, right? No. Resources, coaching process. There you go. All right, so there you go. And you can make your own document out of this. You can use that with your clients, whatever is most helpful for you. So, all right, I've said everything I have to say today. So I'm here to support you. If you have other questions, I can give you your time back, whatever works for all of you. I think this is really fun. I'm delighted to be here with all of you.
I am going to be sharing these 2 resources also in Basecamp, just in case that you want to have later too. It's where we put all of our resources. So is it okay, Julie, to share these resources also with other participants?
Absolutely. Great. Absolutely. My absolute pleasure.
Thank you for being so generous with us today.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Julie also came as a volunteer, so she's not being paid to do this. So thank you.
Wait, that's not what you said, Damien. I'm expecting a big check. No.
No, it's important for people to know because I also do a lot of volunteer work and people may not know that. So
no, it's my pleasure. Please link in with me. It's a really good way to learn about, we're doing some writing, we're doing some sharing of resources on LinkedIn. I'm happy if you want my email address, Damien can give it to you. I'll put it in the chat. You can reach out to me directly. I love being in conversation with other coaches and I'm happy to talk to any of you. So I think David's in the waiting room. Damien, can you see that?
yes, thank you for telling me. I didn't see that. Oh, he's in the coffee that again, he's back.
There he is, I know. So what else can I share? This is an ongoing conversation. I just encourage you all to stay in community with each other and keep talking to each other about coaching. David, welcome back. And David, can I just say, I'm so impressed that you're with us. Thank you for making the effort. You must feel really crummy. And it is just appreciated that you came today. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you feel better.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Damien, I think we might be at an end.
Yes, I really appreciate you coming, being part of that. I think that this your book made a difference in our program. So thank you for
so
your
glad.
contribution
Yes.
to the career, and I think it's also good for you to hear from people who have read your book and give you some
Yeah.
feedback about their experiences. It's for I know from my experience when people talk about their experience in reading my books, it makes sense and it makes feel okay, all of the effort, that we got to put these books together, at least somebody benefiting from that. So it's encouraging. So
It's so true. And I'll leave you with one funny story. Both Laura and I are up. We have to renew our PCC before the end of the year. And we haven't done much development because we wrote 2 books in 3 years. And it was like the 3 years. And you can submit like that as development. So we're thinking about it. And they're like, how many hours did you spend on X? And I'm like, 1 million. So like 1 million hours. I do have one request, if it would be okay to ask, and feel welcome but not obligated. One thing that is very helpful to Laura and to me is, and to the book, is if you did like the book and you did if you can post a review on Amazon, it makes all the difference in the world to people finding the book. And if you don't feel like you can craft something, even just putting a star review is helpful. But if you can even write 1 sentence, like this helped, Kevin, what you said, this helped me with my client, that is super helpful. But again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Don't feel obligated, but if you feel moved, it's very helpful to us. So
thank you.
Definitely.
I think we can do that, Julie. So I appreciate you being here with us today to share the resources you share with us, and we may have you in the future. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see what we can create.
I had a blast. I'll come back anytime.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very
All
much.
right. You guys have a great
Thank you so
evening.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Great.
Thank you. Great to meet each and every one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna head out too. Bye.
Bye, Dan.
Bye,
Thanks
Dan.
for joining.